My name is David Littmann, and I'm a certified handwriting analyst. And handwriting is what we use now to reflect the thinking of a writer. What's in his head, what's on their mind. That's what makes the writing, the letters, the doodles, whatever they're doing, very unique. There's only one chance in 64 billion that your writing would match somebody else's. And that's because the brain is unique. Different nervous systems. It has to do with their experiences in life. It has to do with how they react to things, how they interpret things. And we've known that for some 2,500 years from the philosophers of old and in the Bible. They're all references to trustworthiness, just for example, based on slant, whatever their slant is in the writing. And if it varies, there's a variable thing going through the mind, and you don't have necessarily the trustworthiness that you would expect. But that's just one example. There's some 400 variables, all different, which we have to analyze in order to get the attributes, the personality of an individual, whether it's used for such things as serious fraud or theft, identifying a possible trait in people. That's all part of it. Even when people have lost their limbs, if they get used to using their toes, and I've actually seen this in my lifetime, and they're comfortable with the stylus, the pen or the pencil, it'll come out the same way as they learned in grade school. So that's part of handwriting. It's fascinating, it's jaw-dropping, and I hope you're with us in wanting to know more about it. Now, one of the variables that we look at, and that first comes to people's mind, besides slant, is the size of the writing. Take a look at these three examples. Somebody who writes very large compared to the way they were taught, much larger than the average, might have trouble concentrating because everything around them they're aware of. They want to be seen, they want other things to be seen, and so it's harder for them to concentrate. This is pretty much the way we were taught in school, a copybook type of, in this case, cursive or script writing. And then we have the very concentrative, we call it concentrative writing, people like this. And they are so wrapped in their concentration that even a thunderstorm or even a hurricane, it would be hard to distract them. These people are more easily distracted. So if you're writing like this, if you have to get some work done, meet a deadline, you best sequester yourself in a room all by yourself. Here's how we measure it. This is this is the typical individual's writing. That would be copybook. We call that what we learn in grade school. This is a very concentrated writing. So these are measured in millimeters or inches converted. This is the protractor that shows the angle of the writing. You can see these angles show that it's forward, moving to the right. Those are people interested in others and what's concerning them. Let me show you an example of another variable besides size that we look at. Very important one, it's called connectives. There are three types of connectives. One is called garland. It's kind of like a saucer, and when they connect one letter, one character to another. And when they're garland like that, that's a person who wants to show their friendliness, their constructiveness, working with others. You see the slant is toward others, not back toward oneself. This is called introspective writing. This is a person not necessarily introverted, but introspective. They're analyzing themselves more than they're looking at others and what others are doing. This is more an objective. When the slant is like this, vertical, without a lot of either forward or backward slant, those are more objective thinkers. They're going to stand by, they're going to watch, and they're going to analyze things. And then you get the person who doesn't really want to be known, or what they're thinking, or what they're doing necessarily. A lot of politicians have this because they don't have to make decisions. So you don't know exactly what they're saying, what they're doing, but that's still writing. And they don't have a lot of verticality to the writing. And then you see the printers. Printers, when they have a choice of script, what we call cursive or printing, they'll do this. And this is a block print. These are very interesting people, and they love to solve problems. Sometimes they create problems just to solve problems. But they're likable people. They usually have a lot of good stories, and they do interact with people. So those are this is both a slant and connectives that tells you about personality. The three most important overall features in handwriting that we look for are the form, with legibility meaning, and of course the spacing, many kinds of spacing, and finally the movement, how rapidly the writer is moving the pen across the page, pencil or stylus. So let's look at one of the other variables, very important here, and this is the spacing, but in this case, the margin spacing. You have 4 margins each side of the page, the top and the bottom. And if you'll notice the first paragraph here, it shows a margin that, as you can tell, it's wide on the left, but it crowds the right side. That's the sign of a writer who tends to crowd the oxygen, snuff the oxygen out of a room. So busy talking or making the point, him or herself, that they don't leave room, time, or whatever for the other people to make their points. So we look for that. Look at the second portion of that page, and you see a different kind of margin. It's almost a perfect margin. It leaves room on the right, on the left, and at the top and the bottom. How close they are to the top has to do with how informal an environment that individual is comfortable with. If they leave a lot of room, they prefer a formal than a very informal type of environment. If they crowd the left side, that means there's something in the past, their growing up, their early childhood, that they revere and they need for inspiration or comfort before moving on. If they leave a lot of room on the right, when they have the extra room and they have a lot to write, that means they're kind of uncomfortable with the future. They're wary, they're scared about something in the future. So they refrain from going all the way. In this case, this writer could have written the "and" over here, but did not. They, in this case, were trying to make almost picture perfect. Think of it as a frame to make, and those are people who like design. They can be architecture, friends of that kind of photography, things that require a love of design, interior decorating, things like that. So that's one of the uses of margin spacing in the variable called spacing. Let's look at another one. This is most important, especially when it comes to some of the forensic work we do on criminal activity, how the individual feels about space for himself. But more importantly, we're looking here at the letters of communication. There are 2 in the English language, and you usually look at the lowercase O's and A's. Most importantly, the O. How is the O made? If the O is closed like a circle, but has a large oval, as you can see, that's a person who's interested in communication, not just his own, but other people, and very accepting of other people's ideas or thoughts. And the A is the ratification of that. If it's open like that without any intrusion from ink, as you can see, an itty bitty one there, they're interested in what other people have to say. But you can see, again, you have garlands between letters, and where the connectives between letters are saucer shaped and flowing evenly, you have a good feeling. And these are people, look at that, who have in mind other people, and they want to make a good impression of being helpful and constructive. Contrast that, in this case, the connective letters, with the angles. Does this feel friendly? No. Does it feel rather assertive, possibly aggressive? Yes. And that's exactly what you see in a writer, and you look for many other attributes in the writing that would convey that feeling. But nevertheless, there's some good quality in this kind of writing, as long as it communicates. If writing doesn't communicate, it doesn't matter how beautiful, artistic it looks, it still hasn't accomplished a major feature, which is communication with other people. And in that sense, to the graphologist, to the handwriting analyst, it's not necessarily beautiful writing at all. Let's go to this next variable. We're often asked, how do you assess a person's thinking style? Well, there are three major styles of thinking. And it's very important for teachers to know this, because some students will hold back. They need things to go slowly. They have to absorb a lot, and they think a lot. And what they're noticing now in the grade schools, if they're teaching to read and to write, that those who are making decisions, really cognitive decisions, and they're slow. They don't always have their hands up right away. They absorb things slowly. They think about them much more fully. Well, we can identify that in the handwriting. Look at the tops of the M's. Look at what we call the humps. And the M's, the letter M's, the small letter M's, N's, and of course the H's. If you look at these, they're rounded. They're called arcades. And where there are arcade humps, as you can see throughout here, we call those slow, cumulative thinkers. They tend to grow up, we've noticed, to be the lawyers, the doctors. And so they have very good attributes, but they're not going to make a decision or raise their hands for an answer until they're sure that they have all the information they can possibly get. Information, statistics when they get older, things like that. Now contrast that with one other thinking style, and that is, it's called the analytic, and you can see the angles. This may be a bit of an exaggeration, but I've seen handwriting like this. But again, look at those key letters, the M's. Look at the tops of the M's. They don't look too friendly. Look at the N's. And I think I have some H's in here too. Here it is. You see, they're angular. And that means they don't need a whole lot of extra information. They can make decisions very quickly based on what they have. They tend to be intuitive thinkers as well. So they make many more decisions and raise their hand more often. Teachers sometimes have to say, no, I got to call on somebody else. But they end up being very valuable because they can quickly come to good conclusions. And they don't need all this information in the world to get there. But they will make decisions. These people will hold back and only do it when they feel comfortable. So this has to do with personality traits. The brains are different, and the qualities, you need them both. Here's an interesting facet. You can look at these and the handwriting you get from your friends, Christmas cards too, or whatever. Let's look at the difference in the word spacing. Again, we go back to that very important variable called spacing. You can look at slant, you can look at size, but the key for forensic work, criminal work, in mystery work, is knowing how the individual treats his world of space. How much space does he need or doesn't need? Look at this first row. Look how congested. There's very little spacing between words and letters in this case, but between words. This is a person who needs lots of people near or around them to feel comfortable. This person would never be uncomfortable in a crowd, even people they don't know on a first-hand basis. Look at this writing, below it. Here's a person whose words are separated with more than just one letter, but by many letters. This is a person who will not be comfortable with people near them, overlooking them, looking over their shoulders, or even sitting in a library close to other people. This person needs time and space to concentrate. As a matter of fact, this is a person who might, when writing something, instead of writing on a piece of paper like this, that is a portrait, might go to a window more like a landscape in order to feel comfortable writing. And I've had that in many of the thousands of handwriting samples that have been given me to students, for example. Let's go to another one. Here's a trade stroke, but it's an important trade stroke, just as you look at a T-bar and a T-bar crossing over a T stem. Here is the small letter I. Again, these are one of many variables. I've often seen even youngsters who learning to write in the early years, say 5 to 10 years old, they'll write and their I dot comes down directly over the I stem. This is a person who's almost inevitably the parent or the teacher can identify as a person hard on him or herself. They become almost unkind to themselves if they don't achieve what they want. And they're very eager to do everything and do it right. And often right the first time. Contrast that with a person, and I've seen this kind too, this is a little exaggerated, but they'll make a circle dot. But if they make that circle dot, which is an ornamentation, it makes it artistic, their mind is in that realm. But if they do it with a dot in it, we are not psychiatrists or psychologists, but we know from experience that means the individual is lonely, feels very lonely, isolated, and that's something we look for in a lot of the writings, especially in the teenage years as well. It can be something that we have to work with.